Friends, imagine for a moment that you are not chasing after life, but life itself is chasing after you. Not because of what you own, not because of your titles, but because you are radiating something rare: peace, freedom, and authenticity. That, my friends, is the fragrance of a self-actualized person. When we talk about living authentically, we're really talking about alignment. Alignment between what you think, what you feel, and how you act. Most of the suffering we experience in life doesn't come from external forces. It comes from the gap between who we are inside and the version of ourselves we present to the world. That tension creates stress, anxiety, and even physical symptoms in the body, because the nervous system is wired to detect conflict. When you say yes to things you don't believe in, when you hide what you really feel just to keep the peace, your brain doesn't see that as harmless. It interprets it as danger. Your heart rate changes, your cortisol levels rise, and your body starts running a program of survival rather than growth. But when you begin to live authentically, something shifts, your physiology calms, you literally move out of that stress response and into a state where creativity, learning, and growth become possible. Living authentically isn't about broadcasting your every thought or opinion. And it's not about being reckless with your words. It's about reducing the distance between your inner world and your outer actions. The closer those two get, the more energy you free up to focus on what actually matters. Think about it. Most of us were conditioned from a young age to play roles: the good student, the reliable child, the agreeable friend, the high performer. Those roles helped us survive in certain contexts. But as we move through life, if we keep wearing masks that no longer fit, we end up feeling exhausted and disconnected. Authenticity is about taking off the mask and trusting that the unpolished, unedited version of you is not only enough, it's exactly what the world needs. And here's the interesting part: neuroscience supports this. There's a region of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex, which plays a role in detecting errors and conflict. When you act out of alignment with your true values, that region lights up. Your brain is literally signaling something's off here. On the flip side, when your words, actions, and beliefs are congruent, the brain shifts into a mode of coherence. This coherence is linked with feelings of calm, flow, and presence. That's why authenticity feels so liberating. Your nervous system stops fighting against itself. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds great, but living authentically is risky. What if people reject me? What if I lose relationships or opportunities? And the truth is, yes, you might. But here's the paradox: the relationships and opportunities that dissolve when you live authentically are the very ones that were built on illusion. They weren't designed to last because they weren't built on the real you. What you gain in return is resonance. The right people, the right opportunities, the right environment that matches who you truly are. I remember talking to a researcher who described authenticity as the ultimate energy hack. Pretending is exhausting. Performing is exhausting. Editing yourself constantly is exhausting. The brain consumes an enormous amount of energy when it's managing self-censorship. But when you stop performing, when you start showing up as yourself, all of that energy gets released. You feel lighter, more creative, more alive. And others feel it too. People are drawn to authenticity because it's rare and it's magnetic. When you're unapologetically yourself, you give others permission to do the same. Living authentically also changes how you process failure. When you fail while pretending to be someone else, it feels crushing, because you think, even my mask wasn't good enough. But when you fail while being yourself, it feels different. It's feedback, not condemnation. It becomes information you can use to grow. That shift builds resilience, because you no longer collapse every time life doesn't go according to plan. You trust that even in failure, you're still aligned with who you are. And authenticity doesn't mean you stop evolving. In fact, it makes growth easier, because you're no longer carrying the extra weight of pretense. You can change careers, change beliefs, change directions, because those changes aren't about pleasing anyone else. They're about responding to the truth of who you are right now. Living authentically is a dynamic process. It's not about rigidly clinging to one identity. It's about listening, moment to moment, to what's real for you and honoring it. So if you want to know whether you're stepping into authenticity, ask yourself simple questions. Do I feel lighter when I say this? Do I feel expanded or contracted when I make this choice? Does my body relax or does it tighten? Your nervous system knows the answer before your mind does. Learn to trust that intelligence, because when you stop needing the world to validate who you are, you step into a freedom that no one can take away from you. When we talk about growth over comfort, we're really talking about how the human brain and body are wired for adaptation. The nervous system is not built to thrive in comfort, it's built to respond to challenge. Think about muscle tissue. It only strengthens when it's placed under stress, when resistance forces it to adapt. The same principle applies to your emotional life, your relationships, your career, your creativity. Without some form of stress, what we call stress or positive stress, growth simply doesn't happen. The problem is, we've been conditioned to believe comfort is the ultimate goal. We design entire lifestyles around minimizing friction. We want the perfect temperature, the fastest route, the easiest option. And while convenience can make life smoother, it also dulls our capacity to expand. When the nervous system is never stretched, it gets weaker. Comfort, if you make it your primary pursuit, becomes a cage. The science of neuroplasticity shows us that the brain rewires itself in response to challenge. When you do something difficult, whether that's learning a new language, running a marathon, or even having a tough conversation you've been avoiding, your neurons literally change their connections. The pathways that support resilience, focus, and problem-solving strengthen. That's why the moments in life when you felt most alive, most present, probably weren't the easy ones. They were the times when you were at the edge of your capacity, where comfort ended and challenge began. And yet many people resist this space. Why? Because challenge comes with discomfort, uncertainty, effort, and sometimes pain. But here's the paradox: discomfort is not the enemy. Discomfort is the signal that you're on the edge of growth. Your heart rate increases, your palms sweat, your mind starts racing. That's not weakness. That's your nervous system mobilizing resources, preparing you to adapt. The same physiological state that you interpret as anxiety can also be interpreted as readiness. The difference is meaning. If you see discomfort as a threat, you retreat. If you see it as growth, you lean in. Take something as simple as deliberate cold exposure. When you step into cold water, every cell in your body screams to get out. But if you breathe through the discomfort, your dopamine levels spike, your resilience increases, your nervous system learns to tolerate stress. That adaptation transfers into other areas of your life. You're training your brain and body to stay calm under pressure, to face difficulty without collapsing. The cold becomes a metaphor. Growth requires walking toward what's uncomfortable. This doesn't mean you should live in a constant state of struggle. Growth is not about burning yourself out or seeking pain for the sake of pain. It's about intentional exposure to challenge, choosing the situations that stretch you just beyond your current capacity. In neuroscience, this is called the zone of proximal development. It's the sweet spot where tasks are difficult enough to stimulate growth, but not so overwhelming that you shut down. It's the space where you surprise yourself, where you discover new abilities you didn't know you had. And the truth is, the people who thrive long-term are not the ones who avoid discomfort. They're the ones who develop a relationship with it. They understand that resistance is a teacher. They know that every moment of challenge is literally reshaping their brain, creating new circuits of capability. They stop asking, how do I make this easier? And start asking, how do I grow from this? So ask yourself, when was the last time you did something that scared you? Not reckless fear, but the kind of fear that tells you you're about to step into uncharted territory. That's where growth lives. That's where self-actualization starts to show itself. Not in the moments you feel perfectly safe, but in the moments you're trembling and you still take the next step. And here's the most empowering part. The nervous system is designed to recover. After stress comes adaptation. After strain comes integration. If you lean into challenge and give yourself time to rest, you emerge stronger, wiser, more capable than before. Comfort doesn't give you that. Comfort may soothe you in the short term, but it doesn't transform you. Growth does. So if you're seeking to become your fullest self, stop asking for the path of least resistance. Start asking for the path of most alignment. The question isn't, is this comfortable? The question is, will this make me grow? Because every time you choose growth over comfort, you become less of who the world expects you to be and more of who you were always meant to be. To be inner-directed means that you no longer live your life waiting for signals from the outside world to tell you who you are, what you should do, or whether you're good enough. Instead, you begin to rely on the compass within you, that quiet but steady guide that knows the difference between distraction and direction. It's not about ignoring feedback or isolating yourself from others. It's about building the ability to listen inward first before chasing validation from the external. The brain is highly attuned to external cues. From childhood, we're conditioned to look outside of ourselves for approval: grades in school, performance reviews at work, likes on social media. These signals light up the reward circuits of the brain, specifically dopamine pathways, which makes them powerful drivers of behavior. The challenge is that when your sense of value is tied exclusively to those signals, you become addicted to them. You start chasing the next hit of validation rather than living from your own truth. Over time, this creates a loop of dependence where your actions are dictated not by what matters to you, but by what will get you noticed or accepted. Being inner-directed is about breaking that loop. It doesn't mean you stop caring about outcomes or relationships. It means your anchor is within, not outside. You choose actions because they align with your values, not because they guarantee applause. That shift changes your nervous system. When you operate from within, you activate circuits associated with intrinsic motivation, the drive that comes from personal meaning rather than external reward. Research shows that intrinsic motivation is more sustainable, more resilient, and leads to greater well-being over the long term. Consider how you feel when you're doing something just for recognition. Maybe you're posting a photo online or pushing yourself into a project you don't care about, but that looks impressive. There's a quick dopamine hit if people approve, but it's short-lived, and the crash comes soon after. Now contrast that with something you've done purely because it mattered to you. Maybe writing a piece of music, solving a problem that fascinated you, or helping someone when nobody was watching. The satisfaction from those actions is deeper, longer lasting. That's the difference between external direction and inner direction. And the irony is, the more inner directed you become, the more authentic your impact is on others. People sense when you're grounded in your own compass. They may not always agree with you, but they trust the consistency. Being inner directed builds a kind of credibility that can't be faked, because it comes from alignment, not performance. It also changes how you relate to stress. When you're outer directed, stress comes from trying to predict and control what others will think. It's an endless calculation. Will they like me if I say this? Will I be accepted if I choose this? That mental load is exhausting. But when you're inner directed, the calculation simplifies. The only question is, does this match who I am? That clarity reduces cognitive strain and frees your nervous system from the chaos of trying to please everyone. Of course, stepping into inner direction isn't always easy. It often means disappointing others, or at least breaking from their expectations. That can activate fear circuits in the brain, because humans are wired to crave belonging. But here's the important distinction: belonging is not the same as approval. Approval depends on you fitting into someone else's standards. Belonging happens when you show up as yourself and are accepted for it. You can't experience true belonging if you're always wearing a mask. By being inner directed, you create the possibility of genuine connection, because you're no longer negotiating who you need to be in order to earn love. The practice of inner direction doesn't require grand gestures. It starts with small choices. Notice when you're about to say yes to something you don't want to do simply to avoid conflict. Notice when you're about to edit yourself because you're afraid of how you'll be perceived. Those are the moments where you have a choice. Do you act from fear of rejection, or do you act from alignment with who you are? Every time you choose the latter, you strengthen the neural pathways of authenticity. You're literally training your brain to default to inner direction. And over time, this becomes freedom. Freedom from the endless chase for validation. Freedom from the exhaustion of performance. Freedom from the fear of rejection. When you're inner directed, you stop asking, what will they think of me? And start asking, what do I think of me? That question is far more powerful, because the answer determines the quality of your entire life. Because the moment you stop outsourcing your worth, you start living in alignment with the deepest truth of who you are. There's a big difference between chasing success and seeking meaning. Success, as most of us are taught to define it, is about accumulation, more achievements, more recognition, more wealth, more status. And there's nothing inherently wrong with those things. The human brain is wired to respond to achievement. Every time you accomplish a goal, dopamine is released, and that feels good. But dopamine has a catch: it's fleeting. It's designed to propel you toward the next goal, not to give you lasting fulfillment. That's why success can be addictive. You climb one mountain, and instead of enjoying the view, your mind is already scanning the horizon for the next peak. Meaning is different. Meaning is about contribution, about connecting your actions to something larger than yourself. When you're living in alignment with meaning, the satisfaction doesn't disappear as quickly. Instead of the short spike of dopamine, you activate deeper systems in the brain associated with oxytocin and serotonin, chemicals linked to bonding, well-being, and long-term stability. Meaning nourishes you in a way that achievement alone never can. Think about the moments in your life that felt most significant. Chances are they weren't just about your own success. They were about impact. Maybe you helped someone at a critical moment. Maybe you created something that inspired others. Maybe you stood up for something you believed in. In those moments, the reward wasn't just personal. It was relational. You were part of a bigger story. That's what meaning does. It shifts the focus from me to we. The science of motivation backs this up. People who orient their lives toward intrinsic goals, things like growth, connection, service, report higher levels of well-being, greater resilience under stress, and even better physical health. Extrinsic goals like status and wealth provide short-term boosts but rarely lead to sustained fulfillment. This doesn't mean you shouldn't want to succeed. It means that success without meaning is hollow, and meaning without some measure of success can lack direction. The key is integration, letting success serve meaning, not replace it. There's a phrase often used in neuroscience: neurons that fire together, wire together. The same principle applies to your choices. If you constantly link your sense of worth to external success, you reinforce those pathways. Over time, your brain becomes conditioned to seek validation in numbers, outcomes, applause. But if you start linking your actions to meaning, asking yourself not just, what will I get, but who will benefit, you build different pathways. You literally rewire your brain to find fulfillment in significance rather than just in success. And there's another layer here. When you focus only on success, failure feels catastrophic. If you miss the promotion, if the project doesn't land, if the applause doesn't come, your entire sense of self takes a hit. But when you focus on meaning, failure shifts context. You realize the value wasn't just in the outcome. It was in the process, the growth, the contribution you made along the way. That perspective makes you more resilient because you're not hanging your identity on whether things went perfectly. You're grounded in the fact that your actions mattered, even if the results weren't what you hoped for. So the real shift is moving from asking, what can I achieve, to what can I give? And it's important to understand, giving doesn't always mean grand gestures. It can be as simple as showing up fully in a conversation, sharing your knowledge with someone who needs it, or creating something that reflects truth. The human nervous system is wired for connection, and when you contribute, even in small ways, you tap into that wiring. You feel more alive because you're fulfilling a fundamental part of what it means to be human. And here's something powerful: meaning isn't discovered once, and then you're done. It's created daily. You don't wait for life to hand you some grand purpose. You decide in each moment to bring meaning into whatever you're doing. Washing dishes can be meaningless, or it can be an act of care for the people you live with. Your job can be just a paycheck, or it can be a platform to serve, to grow, to impact. Meaning isn't in the task, it's in how you frame the task. When you start orienting your life toward meaning, success begins to follow in a more sustainable way. People are drawn to those who are driven by significance rather than ego. Opportunities align with authenticity. And the rewards you get aren't just about what you accumulate, they're about who you become. Because success is about what you build for yourself, but meaning is about what you leave behind for others. Radiating acceptance begins with how you see yourself. The brain is an incredible prediction machine. It filters the world not just through raw data, but through your internal state. If you are constantly judging yourself, noticing only your flaws, focusing on what you lack, your nervous system will project that same lens outward. You'll find yourself judging others just as harshly because the brain can't easily separate how it treats the self from how it treats others. On the other hand, when you learn to accept yourself, your imperfections, your mistakes, your humanity, you soften that lens. You create space to extend the same acceptance to others. Acceptance doesn't mean apathy. It doesn't mean you stop striving or ignore behavior that causes harm. It means you stop filtering people, including yourself, through the narrow frame of good enough versus not enough. Instead, you recognize that every single person is on a trajectory of becoming, and that trajectory looks different for each of us. Neuroscience tells us that no two brains are alike. Every individual has a unique set of experiences, neural pathways, and adaptations that shape how they see and move through the world. When you remember that, judgment starts to dissolve. One of the most important functions of the human brain is empathy, and it's linked to a set of neurons often referred to as mirror neurons. These neurons allow us to resonate with the emotions and actions of others. If you see someone in pain, your mirror systems activate, creating a shared emotional experience. The more open and accepting you are, the more freely this system operates. But if you're locked into judgment, constantly categorizing people as better or worse, those pathways get muted. Acceptance reopens them. It reconnects you to the shared human experience. Think of someone you've judged harshly in the past. Maybe they disappointed you. Maybe they didn't meet your standards. When you reduce them to that single story, your brain actually narrows its perception. It shuts down the possibility of seeing the full picture. But when you step back and ask, what pain might they be carrying? What conditions shape their choices? What unseen battles are they fighting? You expand your perspective. You move from judgment to understanding. And in that shift, you radiate acceptance. What's remarkable is that acceptance doesn't just change your relationships. It changes your physiology. Research shows that when people practice compassion and acceptance, their vagus nerve activity increases. The vagus nerve is a key regulator of calm, social connection, and resilience. When it's activated, your heart rate steadies, your breathing deepens, and you feel safer in your body. That internal safety radiates outward. Others sense it, even unconsciously, and they feel safer around you. In this way, acceptance is not passive. It's an active state that reshapes both your brain and the nervous systems of those around you. Now, acceptance doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior or ignoring boundaries. It's not about becoming a doormat. True acceptance has strength in it. It means you can acknowledge reality as it is without needing to distort it or deny it, and still choose your response consciously. You can say, I see who you are in this moment, and I don't need to fight against that. That doesn't stop you from setting limits. It just means your limits come from clarity, not from resentment. When you radiate acceptance, you stop contributing to the cycle of judgment that dominates so much of modern life. We live in a world where comparison is constant, where social media amplifies highlight reels and magnifies flaws. That environment activates circuits of envy and criticism, which damage mental health and erode community. Acceptance interrupts that pattern. It replaces competition with cooperation, suspicion with trust, and isolation with connection. And this extends beyond how you treat individuals. Acceptance shapes how you engage with life itself. When things don't go your way, do you fight reality, insisting it should look different? Or do you acknowledge what is and then decide how to move forward? Resistance to reality creates suffering. Acceptance reduces it. The more you practice acceptance of yourself, of others, of life, the more energy you free up. Energy that can be directed not toward complaining or resisting, but toward creating, connecting, and living fully. The people who inspire us most aren't usually the ones with flawless RA, some A's, or perfect lives. They're the ones who, despite their struggles, radiate a sense of openness, of non-judgment, of ease in being themselves and allowing others to be themselves too. That kind of presence is magnetic. It calms those around them. It gives permission for authenticity, and it comes from cultivating acceptance. Because when you stop needing people to fit your idea of who they should be, you begin to see them and yourself as you really are. One of the deepest shifts that happens when you start stepping into your fullest self is that you no longer experience life as something happening to you in isolation. You begin to sense that you are part of a larger system. Something greater than your individual achievements, greater than your fears, greater even than the narratives you've been carrying about who you are. This isn't a mystical idea. It's actually grounded in biology. The human brain is designed for connection, and our nervous system is constantly scanning for signals of belonging. When we feel connected, the brain shifts into states that promote trust, creativity, and resilience. When we feel disconnected, it shifts into survival mode, primed for threat and defensiveness. What's fascinating is that this sense of connection doesn't only come from relationships with people. It can also come from connecting to nature, to a purpose, or to a vision that transcends your personal story. Neuroimaging studies show that when people experience awe, standing under a night sky, listening to powerful music, or witnessing something vast and beautiful, the activity in the brain's default mode network decreases. That's the network associated with self-referential thinking, the constant looping of me, my goals, my problems. In moments of awe, the boundaries of the self soften, and you feel part of something larger. That shift is profoundly regulating for the nervous system. It reduces stress, it lowers inflammation, and it creates perspective. And perspective is exactly what we need in a culture that so often convinces us we're separate, competing fragments. We're told life is a race, that we're on our own, that scarcity is the rule. But your biology tells a different story. Human beings evolved not in isolation, but in groups. Cooperation, not competition, is what allowed our species to thrive. Oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, isn't just about parental or romantic love. It's released in moments of shared trust, collective effort, and mutual support when you contribute to something bigger than yourself. Whether that's helping your community, protecting the environment, or dedicating your work to a cause, you activate those same pathways. You literally feel more alive because your nervous system recognizes, I belong to this larger whole. This doesn't mean you lose your individuality. It actually enhances it. When you feel connected to something greater, your actions gain context. You're not just working to pay bills or to build your reputation. You're working in service of a story that continues beyond you. That sense of continuity is deeply stabilizing. Studies on meaning and longevity show that people who feel connected to a purpose greater than themselves live longer, recover more quickly from illness, and are more resilient in the face of stress. The body responds differently when it knows that your life has significance beyond individual survival. Connection to something greater also changes how you interpret challenges. When life throws difficulties your way, if you believe you're just a small, isolated self, those challenges can feel overwhelming. But if you see yourself as part of a larger system, those same difficulties can be reframed as part of the unfolding process. You stop asking only, why is this happening to me? And start asking, how does this fit into the larger picture I'm part of? That shift doesn't remove the pain, but it gives the pain a container. And often, that's what helps us endure. And it's important to remember that connection to something greater doesn't have to look grand. You don't need to start a movement or build a massive organization. Sometimes it's as simple as tending to the relationships right in front of you, or choosing to care for the place you live, or mentoring someone who comes after you. Each of those actions signals to your nervous system, I'm part of a chain, I'm part of a whole, my actions ripple outward. That awareness expands your sense of self, and paradoxically, the more expansive your sense of self becomes, the less you feel trapped in fear or scarcity. When you live disconnected, the world feels like a hostile place, full of competition, full of threat. When you live connected, the same world feels alive with opportunity, with cooperation, with meaning. And that change isn't just philosophical, it's physiological. Your brain chemistry shifts, your stress hormones drop, your heart rate variability improves. You are literally healthier when you live with a felt sense of connection to something larger than yourself. And perhaps most importantly, when you cultivate that connection, you stop needing to prove your worth through endless striving. You already know you belong, you already know your life is interwoven with others, and from that place, your actions naturally become more aligned, more generous, more authentic. You no longer move through life asking, am I enough? You move through life knowing, I am part of something vast, and what I do matters within it. Because the moment you stop seeing yourself as separate, you start living as if your very existence is an essential piece of the greater whole. So the real question tonight is not when will I become self-actualized? The real question is, am I willing to live as if I already am? Because every time you choose authenticity, growth, compassion, and peace, you're not becoming a self-actualized person. You already are one,